Formula One is back and we are back, and DC, for the moment Daniel Ricciardo is back with McLaren, but only for 9 races. Day 1 back at school, and we've got some big news.
Yeah, I think the rumour mill has been going around for some time now. There hasn't been a happy camp there in terms of Daniel's performance. He's not happy with how much he was getting out of the car relative to Lando Norris, who has continued to impress in his relatively young career. And in the end, armed with the knowledge that they had 1 more year to run in this contract, when there is potential out there that McLaren wanted to scoop up, and we can get into that in a fuller way afterwards. But they've had to make that tough decision, and you could see a very emotional Daniel Ricciardo talking through the fact that he doesn't know where his future lies, but for now he will give his all in the remaining races, and we all hope, of course, that he's able to deliver the performance that McLaren thought they'd signed him up to do.
Really interesting as well. He said that he wouldn't just settle for taking any seat on the Formula One grid. He wants to be in a competitive seat, which you would imagine would be Alpine, or essentially going back to Renault, which is slightly odd. But yeah, we could be in a situation where we don't have Daniel Ricciardo on the grid next year. But let's just remind ourselves as to how this all happened. So Sebastian Vettel, if you remember, from Hungary, said that he was retiring. Then day 1 of the summer break, Fernando Alonso said he was going to Aston Martin. Was that a shock?
I think to many it was. I don't want to appear like I'm some sort of visionary, and I would never have called that per se, but I've always had this mind in Formula One. If you can imagine it, it can happen.
Yeah.
So with that in mind, nothing shocks me.
Yeah.
And I'm very content to wait to the official announcement. I know everyone's scurrying around for breaking news, but the reality is it's official when it's official. And, you know, I saw Zach Brown at Pebble Beach over the weekend, and, you know, there's private conversations that go on, but the Daniel news is not official until the press release goes out, because things can change right up until the moment someone press send.
What happened after that was that Alpine announced Oscar Piastri, this superb young talent who won everything in F2, has been on the sidelines for this year in Formula One, but the understanding was always that he would drive for Alpine. As soon as they put out that statement, Oscar then put out a statement saying he wasn't driving for Alpine. I mean, you can't make this up.
Well, he is managed by our own Mark Webber. Mark has good relationship with Andreas Seidel, who is the team manager, effectively, team principal of McLaren from his Porsche days. And they've obviously had a private conversation, and looking at the future potential of Alpine, they've waited for an option to lapse that Alpine apparently didn't take up the option, and therefore they were able to sign to McLaren. You know, Mark's job as the manager is to make sure his man's in a race car guaranteed. At the point at which the option lapsed, clearly he didn't feel Alpine was going to give him that. Otherwise, I would assume they would have carried through on the journey they'd started. It will go to the Contract Recognition Board, which is where all of the drivers' contracts are actually registered. It's a legal body in Switzerland. I've been there myself back in the Williams McLaren days. The lawyers will cold-heartedly look at the facts of the contracts, and have Alpine allowed an option date to lapse without taking up the option, then they don't have any other call on Oscar Piastri, and therefore he's completely free to go to McLaren.
Goodness, this is exhausting, isn't it? Here we are in this beautiful, tranquil setting, although standing in front of some bushes, but we are actually in Spa. This is a racetrack that everybody loves. I love it, you love it, fans are here already, and yet there's a threat of the axe hanging over it. Why is that?
Well, this Grand Prix has been off the calendar on occasion when you look through the history of the sport, and largely that's been down to resource and finance. The local region that financed this event at various times have not been able to meet the asking price that Formula One put forward. Now, I have to assume there'll be a negotiation that's taking place right now. They're out of contract. I know from the local community and the local businesses, it would be a huge loss to them. Formula One coming to town is really the lifeblood of how they... I just
stopped you when I said a tranquil setting. If you just look here, the Munkhoff bus has turned up. But anyway, we'll carry on.
Yeah, but you know, I like a good bus ride. We'll take that afterwards. We hope that this stays on the calendar, but it is Formula One is a business. Yes, it's a sport, it's an entertainment, but they have to pay to be on the calendar, just like every other facility. The British Grand Prix has had various moments where they were struggling to pay the actual asking price from the commercial rights holder, and negotiations had to take place.
When did you first come to this racetrack?
My earliest memory is racing here in 1990, not in Formula One, but in the support race, Opel Lotus at that time. And I actually left in an air ambulance because I broke my leg. So not a great first visit to Spa.
Well, I feel bad for what I'm going to say, because my first visit here was 1998, where there was a huge crash, which, you know...
caused by Eddie Irvine.
I'm not apportioning blame, but you were involved in that.
I was. I probably was I was the cause of that accident.
Michael Schumacher was furious.
He was, yeah, he was indeed, and I understand. But there was two. There was a crash at the first corner, took out half the field, and then later in the race, when Michael was leading comfortably, he then ran into the back of me. But we spoke about it afterwards, and we kissed and made up, and it's water under the racing bridge.
Well, what on earth do you think is going to happen here this weekend? At the moment, Max Verstappen firmly in control of the championship. There's going to be so many Dutch fans here. Seas of orange. Is it going to be his weekend?
Well, it remains to be seen, are any teams taking penalties here? Because if you are going to take engine penalties, Spa would be a track that you would be more favourable than, say, Zandvoort, where it'd be more difficult to overtake. Monza might be another option to take a penalty because it's a very open circuit. But in terms of racing and ability to overtake, this would probably be better than the other two. So teams may strategically take a penalty here. Ferrari have had some penalties, as we know, so they're probably not one of those teams. But Red Bull maybe Mercedes, it remains to be seen. But if we put all that silly penalty business to one side, this actually should be a track that suits Red Bull. They've got very good top speed, lot of straights, so that can afford them to run a bit more downforce in the middle sector. Ferrari will be their I'd say closest rival. Mercedes may be on the back foot slightly because they haven't really shown the great top speeds on many of the other tracks. Therefore, no big surprise they had such a strong performance in Budapest, which is not really about top speed.
Okay, you need to go and get your bus. I'm going to take a short walk back. You can join us both 6:30 Saturday and Sunday. We'll see you then.